Hey filmmakers, I want to talk to you about Easy Rider, the 1969 cult classic starring Dennis Hopper and Peter Fonda. For those of you who are watching, I imagine many have already seen this film. If you haven't, it follows Dennis Hopper's character and Peter Fonda's character traveling across country to New Orleans on their motorcycles. Basically, they made a decent amount of money off of a recent drug transaction and are seeing some of the country in the process, going from LA to New Orleans. On the way, they encounter some hippies, some rednecks, and a lawyer played by Jack Nicholson. I don't probably talk about when I first saw a film in doing some of these. This particular film, I was 17 years old, junior in high school. And another kid I was talking to, we were talking about films and stuff because we were both in drama. And he was telling me about Easy Rider, basically saying, oh, you need to see this film, it's great, blah, 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 blah. Well, I didn't actually see the film until many years later, maybe like 6 or 7 years later. I rented it on VHS and watched it at home on my little square TV. And even then, the film did have an impact on me because it was such a fantastic film. And I guess what makes it a fantastic film, it isn't just such the fact that they actually filmed themselves using drugs, the New Orleans aspect of it, the motorcycles, which I'm a motorcycle fanatic myself, although I don't ride Harleys or choppers. I'm more of a classic cafe racer biker. I still appreciate the choppers. What rang true to me was kind of that sense of the great American road trip, the freedom aspect of it, of being able to just hop onto your bike and take off and do whatever you want. And at one point in the film, Jack Nicholson's character says this to Dennis Hopper's character of like, it's not you they hate, it's what you represent that they hate.
What you represent to them is freedom.
In referring to some small town rednecks that they met. And it's you're anti the status quo. You're doing what you want to do versus doing what you're supposed to do. Some of the few things about it is that when they filmed it, they put the motorcycles on the back of a truck. They drove across country, filmed a lot of these scenes. Even though Peter, Dennis, and another writer, Terry Southern, are credited as writing the film, a lot of it was improvised. And another interesting thing about it, it was made on a very low budget. It was made, depending on where you get your information from, anywhere from $400,000 to $600,000, which even at the time wasn't very much money. Peter Fonda himself had to actually fund a lot of the making of it. And another interesting little fact is they actually spent more money on the music for the film than they did making the film itself. All the music rights cost roughly $1 million. And that's one of the things that makes this movie so impactful, is the way that they incorporate music to it. But it set a trend in movie making. The film made really good money back on the initial investment, and Hollywood kind of stood up and said, oh wait, we can actually make these low budget independent films in this kind of dramatic style, this real world look at the country, and still make money. And so they were more willing to fund these types of movies later on. I guess the reason why I want to talk about it now is, of course, Peter Fonda just died this last weekend. Dennis Hopper's been dead, and Jack Nicholson is still kicking around. Even though he actually plays a pretty minor role in the film, he does play a memorable role in the film. One of the reasons why I want to kind of talk about it is how relevant it is to life today. These guys go into these small towns and they have these ignorant rednecks who don't like them because they're different, because they're long hair. And looking at the world today, it's sad to see how we haven't changed, right? I mean, we've got nationalism growing in the US, in the UK, in all these countries. And it's the same thing. It's saying, you're not like me, so I don't like you, get the fuck out of my country. This film is about that. It's about people that aren't like everybody else, but still just want to live a nice, happy life. When Easy Rider was released, one of the things you want to think about as well is look at the era when that was released in. So the film was made in 1968, released in 1969, and we had the assassinations of Robert Kennedy and Martin Luther King. We had the Vietnam War going on at the time, and of course all the protests and uprising towards that. And it was a really dramatic time of change in the country, and it seemed like some of it was changing for the better. And we've somehow, that pendulum has then swung back recently. So we were becoming a country of anti-war that stay out of this kind of stuff that we don't need to be in, and this treat people with equality and respect. And now we're kind of swinging back into a country that's constantly invading other countries, into a country of xenophobes and racists. And a film that was made 40 years ago is sadly more relevant now than it was, say, 10 or 20 years ago. And that's how that pendulum is swinging. So I guess if you haven't seen this film, go out and see it. If you have seen it, go watch it again. I just rewatched it again this weekend, and I found it just as enjoyable of a movie as I did when I saw it 20 years ago. You know, each of the characters in it, the acting is brilliant. The the directing by Dennis Hopper is interesting because if you read some stuff online, it sounds like it was quite difficult to work with, and his edit of the film would have probably been quite a bit different than the edit that we saw. And, you know, obviously it's not a perfect film, but it's not, I don't think it's meant to be a perfect film. I think that's part of what makes this a great film, is the fact that it's not a perfect film. It has its flaws, but the relevancy to the life that we live and the world that we live in, that's what makes this a great film. And the fact that this film kicked off that kind of dramatic drama, tragedy style of filmmaking that it carried on through the 70s. So once again, excellent film. Rent it if you have not seen it, or download it, or watch movies, however it is you watch movies that have been already released, and enjoy.